When making the sequel to Alien, James Cameron tried to make his version different from the original, and not just because he wanted to keep it fresh. He also said the original turns Ripley into a sex object when she strips down to her underwear.
And then she dropped her gear and was in her panties for the last scene. You see, that to me, that stepped over that line.
This criticism and his means of addressing it not only explains many of Cameron's decisions in Aliens, but it also shows the contrasting styles of James Cameron and the director of the original Alien, Ridley Scott. Despite Cameron's accusation of sexism, an early draft of the original Alien actually notes that all characters are unisex and can be played by a man or a woman. The final film mostly reflects that idea. The majority of the dialogue is gender neutral, and nobody acts particularly feminine or masculine. But even with a genderless script, each actor's gender influences the final product, like when Dallas feels the need to protect Ripley from the alien, implying that she's somehow more vulnerable than he is, or there are slight modifications of dialogue. A male character makes a sex joke that isn't in the script and was likely improvised on set, and in classic stereotypical fashion, the woman does not appreciate it.
And I'd rather be eating something else, but right now I'm thinking food.
Which brings us back to the panties, an article of clothing that certainly would have looked different if Ripley were a man, especially since we do see the men wearing different underwear in the opening scene. The final underwear scene in Alien is far from pornographic, as Cameron implies, but it's obviously shot in a way that plays up Ripley's nakedness. Ripley strips down to get comfortable at a time when she's actually in the most danger. Her exposure highlights the anxiety of the scene by showing her vulnerability to the alien lurking in the shadows. Here, director Ridley Scott uses a classic trope of the horror genre by having the villain stalk a vulnerable, naked female character, a trope similarly used in Psycho and Jaws. But a perfectly valid reaction to all this talk of underwear is simply, who cares? Is this really a big deal in movies with much more egregious blood, terror, and sexual imagery?
I don't understand this.
You may not care about the panties, but James Cameron certainly did, and as a result, his sequel not only changes the underwear, but it also changes Ripley. For starters, Cameron changes how Ripley is portrayed in her underwear. In a scene where Ripley gets out of cryosleep, her underwear is not only less revealing, but none of the men around her look at her any differently, and the camera never gazes on her nakedness like it does in Alien. In addition to the change in underwear, Cameron avoided making any female characters vulnerable at any point.
Hey Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
Compare the supporting female character in each film. In Alien, Lambert is a hysterical mess who wants to abandon the ship, and she even has a catfight with Ripley. But in Aliens, Vasquez is muscular, has the biggest gun, and sacrifices herself for the team. Ripley also changes between films. In Alien, her character is written as gender neutral, but the film's direction plays up her femininity to heighten our fear of the xenomorph. In Aliens, Cameron downplays Ripley's feminine vulnerability, but ironically, he also elevates Ripley's womanhood into a crucial element of the story. We find out in the very beginning of the film that Ripley had a daughter all along, who died while she was in hypersleep. From here, the story is the same as the first Alien, but there's an additional mother-daughter subplot between Ripley and Newt, and both the mother Ripley and the mother alien fight to protect their young, which results in one of the best movie quotes of all time.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Unlike the original film's infrequent hints at gender, Aliens regularly reminds us that Ripley is a woman. The script intentionally contains the same male locker room talk as the original, but this time, Ripley's the one rolling her eyes.
There's some juicy colonist daughters we have to rescue from their virginity. Favorite duty.
But Cameron also makes her character more masculine and aggressive. She surprises the male soldiers by showing she can operate the exosuit.
Where you want it?
And when Ripley gets the chance to escape with her life, her desire for revenge goes so far that she intentionally angers the mother xenomorph by torching her eggs. A quick look at Ripley says it all. In Alien, she's escaping in fear with her flamethrower. In Aliens, she's facing the mom head-on, holding not just a flamethrower, but also a young child and an extra machine gun. And when it comes to female characters, that badass persona is a James Cameron hallmark. He loves writing female characters who can do pull-ups like Vasquez and Sarah Connor, or who fight men, like in Avatar and Titanic. Neither portrayal of Ripley is better or worse. Both characterizations fit their respective films. Alien creates fear by showing violation, impregnation, and sexual assault. Even though Ripley was written without gender, Ridley Scott played up her gender to add to those fears. In contrast, Cameron set out to write an action film about revenge, not about fear and vulnerability. So he centered the film around a core aspect of femininity, motherhood, and used it to motivate both Ripley and the mother xenomorph. Of course, the resolution of this feminine conflict is actually quite masculine. It's a fight to the death, and it shows Cameron's very 80s perspective on female empowerment. Cameron's female warrior take on Ripley is indicative of another one of his hallmarks. His movies are often tied to American culture at the time they were made. For a movie that's supposed to take several hundred years in the future, Aliens feels like it takes place in 1980s America. Apparently in 200 years, business suits will have that 80s popped collar, Marines will look like they're suited up for the jungles of Vietnam, and people will still be making jokes about Latinos being illegal immigrants.
Right. Somebody said alien. She thought they said illegal alien and signed up.
Along with the 80s aesthetics, the film also reaffirms the traditional nuclear family. A scene in the director's cut shows a mother and father disciplining their misbehaving son and daughter in a space rover.
Knock it off. I catch either of you playing in the air ducts again, I'll tan your hides.
Even on a distant alien planet, families still act like they're straight out of an 80s sitcom. And by the end of the film, Ripley has gained a nuclear family of her own. She has a husband, a daughter, and even the android functions as a sort of loyal pet that protects the family. In contrast, Alien feels much more timeless, which reveals the hallmark of Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott's movies have distinct atmospheres that almost never feel tied to the time they were made. His film Blade Runner feels like a completely foreign world, not America in the 1980s, and Alien feels just as otherworldly, not a product of the late 70s. In contrast, all you have to do to know when Aliens came out is look at the hairdos or the Reebok sneakers. Perhaps these differences in style explain the differences in Ripley's character. Ridley Scott favors atmosphere above all, which means creating a futuristic, gender-integrated workplace, while also using horror tropes to heighten fear. But Cameron wanted to make a more culturally aware film. That's why Ripley embodies the 80s ideals of female empowerment through excelling in traditionally male environments. All things considered, the first two Alien movies are perhaps the most iconic example of both the original and the revisionist sequel being exciting, unique masterpieces, but for completely different reasons. It's always a difficult task to write a sequel to a classic movie, but Aliens pulls it off because it changed according to the vision of the filmmaker. Aliens may have a similar story structure to Alien, but it makes the bold choice of drastically changing the tone, atmosphere, and gender dynamics of the first film. There's a lot of debate online over which movie is better, but what's the point of choosing when, for once, you can have both for a change? Thank you to our patrons for supporting this video. If you like what you saw, consider going to patreon.com/nowyousseeit to keep this channel going. The more people who support us, the more freedom we'll have to make more ambitious and interesting videos. Thanks for watching.